The day Bear Brook State Park became a place of terror, no one knew it yet. Families still walked the trails. Children still played near the trees. But hidden just beyond the path, something unspeakable was already buried. 4 lives erased, 2 rusted barrels, and a mystery that would haunt America for decades. Chapter 1. The First Barrel. In May of 1985, Bear Brook State Park in Allenstown, New Hampshire was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels safe. Pine trees stood tall, birds cut through the air, and the trails carried nothing more dangerous than footsteps and laughter. That illusion shattered when a hunter wandered off the path. He noticed something strange near a shallow depression in the ground. A large metal barrel, old and rusted, partially buried and hidden by leaves. At first, he thought it was trash. Then, he smelled it. Police were called. When they opened the barrel, even seasoned officers froze. Inside were the decomposing remains of a woman and a young girl. No identification. No missing persons report that matched. No sign of who they were, or who had done this to them. The victims had been dead for years. Investigators scoured the park, convinced this wasn't an accident. They searched for more evidence, more clues, more answers. But the forest kept its silence. The woman showed signs of violent trauma. The child had been murdered as well. Whoever had done this didn't just kill. They disposed carefully, deliberately, as if trying to erase the victims from existence. The case stunned the small town. Rumors spread quickly. Was it a family annihilation? A cult? A serial killer passing through? With no names, no witnesses, and no suspects, the investigation stalled. But what no one realized in 1985 was this: the forest was still hiding more, and the worst discovery was yet to come. Chapter 2. The Second Discovery. For years after the first barrel was found, Bear Brook State Park tried to return to normal. The trails reopened. Families came back. The forest, as always, stayed silent. But the case never left the minds of investigators. 2 victims, a woman and a child, with no names, no history, no explanation. It didn't make sense. It never had. 15 years passed. Then, in the summer of 2000, police decided to search the park again. This time, they didn't rely on chance. They brought in cadaver dogs. The dogs led them deeper into the woods, farther from the trail, farther from where the first barrel had been uncovered. The ground looked ordinary, no signs, no disturbances, until the dogs stopped. Beneath the soil lay another barrel. When investigators opened it, the horror doubled. Inside were the remains of 2 more young girls. No adults, no personal items, no clues explaining how or why they ended up there. Now it was clear this was not one crime. It was a pattern. 4 victims, 2 barrels, buried years apart, yet close enough to suggest they were connected. The ages of the children raised a chilling possibility. These girls may have lived together. They may have been sisters. They may have been a family. But no one had reported them missing. No school records, no neighbors, no photos, no names. It was as if someone had erased an entire household and hidden the remains where nature would guard the secret. Investigators faced an impossible question. How do you solve a murder when you don't even know who the victims are? The case was renamed the Allenstown Four, and with no suspects, no identities, and no clear timeline, it went cold again. But beneath the surface, science was about to change everything. And when it did, the forest would finally begin to speak. Chapter 3, Mindy Lektrutthrocht. A man with many names. For decades, the Bear Brook murders refused to give up their secrets. Investigators had 4 victims, but no identities, no timeline, and no suspect. The case files grew thicker the leads grew colder. Then one detail began to stand out. The woman in the first barrel had lived a life off the grid. No medical records, no employment history, no trace in any database. Whoever she was, someone had made sure she was hard to find, even in death. A break in the pattern. In the early 2000s, investigators reopened the case with fresh eyes. They re-examined witness statements from the late 1970s and early 1980s, years when the barrels were likely placed. One name surfaced again and again. A man who moved constantly. A man who used aliases. A man who showed up with women and children and left without them. He called himself Bob Evans. Neighbors remembered him as charming at first, then frightening. He lived briefly in New Hampshire, then vanished. Later, police learned Bob Evans wasn't his real name at all. It was just one of many. The chameleon. As investigators dug deeper, a disturbing picture emerged. The man known as Bob Evans had left a trail across the United States, California, Arizona, New Hampshire, Texas, always changing names, jobs, and families. Women he lived with disappeared. Children he claimed as his own were never seen again. In 1986, the same man was arrested in California for the murder of a woman named Evelyn Marie Vaughn, a crime he committed while living under yet another identity. In prison records, his true name finally surfaced: Terry Peter Rasmussen. He died behind bars in 2010, never confessing to the Bear Brook murders. But investigators weren't convinced the story ended there, because Rasmussen had a pattern. And Bear Brook fit it perfectly. The only problem? There was still no proof, no fingerprints, no confession, no direct link, until science stepped in and rewrote the rules of justice forever. Chapter 4. The dead finally speak. For years, Terry Peter Rasmussen had been only a theory, a suspect without proof. He had died in prison in 2010, taking whatever secrets he knew to the grave. And for a while, it seemed the Bear Brook murders would remain unsolved forever. Then science caught up with the past. In the late 2010s, investigators turned to a tool that had already cracked other cold cases: genetic genealogy. Using DNA extracted from the victims, analysts began building family trees, tracing distant relatives who had no idea their bloodline was connected to a murder case. It took months, then years. But in 2019, the silence finally broke. Authorities announced that the woman from the first barrel had a name: Marlice Elizabeth Honeychurch. She had been living under the alias Marie Vaughn, one of many false identities tied to Rasmussen. Two of the children were identified as her daughters, Marie Vaughn and Sarah McWaters. For the first time in more than 40 years, 3 victims were no longer unknown. Families were notified. Photographs surfaced. Lives that had been erased were suddenly real again. But one mystery remained. The 4th child, the youngest, did not match Marlice's DNA. She wasn't her daughter. That revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. Who was this child? And how did she end up buried alongside the others? The answer would be even darker than anyone expected. In 2021, genealogists delivered the final truth. The little girl was Rasmussen's own biological daughter. She had been living with him under yet another fake family structure. And when his life unraveled, she vanished with the others. The realization was chilling. This wasn't just murder. It was total erasure, a man destroying every trace of the lives he controlled. With DNA confirmation complete, investigators officially named Terry Peter Rasmussen as the killer behind the Bear Brook murders. But justice had arrived too late. Rasmussen was already dead. He would never face trial. He would never explain why. And the forest, which had guarded the truth for decades, finally gave up its last secret. But one question still lingered in the shadows. How many more victims did Rasmussen leave behind? that no one has found yet. Chapter 5. What the Forest Still Hides. When the final identifications were announced, Bear Brook State Park fell silent in a different way. This time, it wasn't hiding secrets, it was holding memories. For more than 40 years, 4 human beings had existed only as evidence tags and case numbers. Now they had names, histories, families who finally knew what happened, even if the answers came too late. Investigators closed the Bear Brook case with Terry Peter Rasmussen named as the killer. But closure in this story was never clean. Rasmussen had lived under dozens of aliases. He drifted through states, relationships, and families with ease, leaving broken lives behind him. Detectives believe the 4 victims found in Bear Brook were not his only ones. Other missing women, other children who vanished quietly, other crimes buried deeper than barrels in the woods. Some families still wait. Bear Brook itself remains open. Hikers still walk the trails, children still laugh near the trees. Yet beneath that calm surface lies a reminder of how easily evil can hide in plain sight, and how long it can go unnoticed. This case didn't end with handcuffs or a courtroom verdict. It ended with science speaking for the dead, and giving voices back to those who were erased. And it left behind a truth that refuses to fade. Some crimes don't end when the killer dies. They end only when the truth is finally uncovered. Some stories end, but their echoes never fade. The pain, the courage, the unanswered questions. They remind us why truth still matters. If this story reached you, take a moment. Like, share, and subscribe. Not just to follow more cases, but to honor the lives, the lessons, and the voices that history tried to silence. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and never forget, evil hides in silence, but truth lives in those who refuse to look away. This is Best Cases, where truth never dies.